Hey guys, it's Brant, and I just want to say really quick, I really appreciate you guys watching my videos. Be sure to click subscribe and hit the notification button so you get notifications so you don't miss any content. Also, feel free to leave a thumbs up or leave a comment and enjoy the video.
In my head, in my head.
Hey guys, it's Brant, and I'm back with a video today. And today I've got Rick. You see that Rick is right there. He's this way right here. And we both were talking about The Dirt, and I saw it the day before he did. He actually held off. Did you still hold off to watch it with your
Yep.
friends? Okay.
Yeah, I waited until Saturday night.
Yeah, so I actually watched it. He's actually beat me in times of seeing it. I've still only seen it 3 times because I had the opportunity to watch it a 4th time. And you're up to how many times now? Up to
4 times.
Up to 4.
Yep.
So we just wanted to just talk. I basically wanted to talk to him about it, and we just figured it'd be cool to include you guys in on it and let you hear the conversation that we're going to have. And I promise to let Rick talk more this time.
No worries. No worries.
So I'm going to go ahead and let you start.
All right.
What the question I want to ask is first of all, how did the night go with your friends and everything? How cool was that watching it with your buddies that grew up watching, or grew up listening to Motley Crue with you or something like that? And how cool was that?
It was fun. It felt like a Saturday night, back in the 80s where we would go to the video store and rent something that we all wanted to watch. I miss those days so much. Those Saturday nights at the video store were so good. And it felt like that. It felt like we had like this music video that, was the talk of the town, and we couldn't wait to watch it. So it was cool to gather around and watch that in that capacity. And I mean, there was so much fun about that movie. We couldn't just watch it in silence. We had to hit pause 1,000 times and talk about what had just happened, or the discrepancies that we saw, which I'm sure you saw every single one of them too. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was hard to hold off because I was off on Friday and I sat down at my TV at one point on Friday, and I didn't even log into Netflix. It was too much of a temptation because sometimes how Netflix just starts playing on its own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't want to see it, and yeah, it was well worth the wait.
I haven't told this story. It's kind of embarrassing. Do you remember a few weeks ago whenever I made the post on one of my social medias, whenever when they first started promoting it, and I'm like, I'm going to be watching this, and I'm going to make a review video about it. Remember that? It was about a month ago.
Uh-huh.
Well, I was under the impression that The Dirt was coming out that Friday night. I totally missed the date. So that's Thursday night. I stayed up till midnight, and I was like, popped on Netflix on my phone. My wife had done went to sleep, and I popped Netflix up on my phone, had my headphones in. I was going to lay there in the bed and watch it. Never started, so I was like, well, maybe give it a little bit of time. And so I set my alarm and to wake me up like every hour to check. And I figured at the latest it started at 3 a.m. because that 3 a.m. is, midnight in California. Mm-hmm. And then the next morning I got up and my wife was like, I'm like, it never did start. She's looking on her Netflix and she goes, it says March 22nd, dummy. And I was like, oh, okay. But, yeah, I wanted to watch it. I wanted to stay up and do the same thing. I just didn't. And then I watched it when I got home that evening. Me and my wife watched it, and she really enjoyed it. And we started talking about it, and she's like, yeah, Motley Crue's like my top 3 favorite bands, and And she was I wanted to get her input. So I asked her, I said, because I know that even though Motley Crue's, she's a big fan of them, she's still a casual listener. You know, she doesn't know, like, I'm like, okay, who was all in the band? And she's like, well, Nikki Sixx. I'm like, yeah. And, you know, she's like, Tommy Lee. And you know, she was able to name, but, you know, then if I start asking, okay, name their albums, you know, but she really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the hell out of it. And
my wife, her 3 favorite bands are probably Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, and Tupac. And she likes rap. I'm not a rap fan at all, but she's super critical with movies, and she watched it Friday night, and she did not like it. But that being said, she's super critical of movies. It's very odd. I mean, I love movies, and it's like pulling teeth to get her to go to a movie with me. Yeah. So, but she did not like it, and which I didn't take as I'm not going to like it, because I knew, I was like, well, you're super critical of movies, so it has to be perfect for her to like it. She's never seen Bohemian Rhapsody, and she wants to see it now because she's curious how that is compared to this. So, yeah.
Well, even Bohemian Rhapsody still has its timeline inconsistencies, and it still has some glaring omissions and a lot of creative, whatever they call it, the creative things that they take. So you were talking about inconsistencies. Name the ones that you noticed. Inconsistencies, timeline things that just wasn't right or maybe altered.
Yeah, first off, 1973, you know, young Frank in his room, young Nikki Sixx, listening to T-Rex. There's a Kiss Alive poster on the wall. And when the chairs flipped over, Kiss's first album's there. I was just like, I probably should preference any gripe or complaint I have about the movie is just, it's not really a complaint or gripe. It's coming from the fanboy side. Like, I mean, I wanted this movie to last forever. I really wish it would have been a series.
I was going to ask you that. Yep.
But that was my first inconsistency. What was yours?
I noticed that right off. I noticed, I saw that. I noticed the album before I noticed the poster. And so I actually went back and paused it and took a picture of it and was going to post it. And then I was like, you know, I didn't want to either start pointing out inconsistencies or start doing spoilers. I wanted to wait, and I gave everybody an opportunity to maybe watch it or whatever, you know, or at least say, hey, this has spoilers. If you don't want to see, you know, don't watch. But I noticed the Kiss Alive on the second viewing. I didn't notice it on the first. I noticed it on the second. And I think, my opinion, and I'm with you, any inconsistencies, I used to work in movies. I know that they take creative things and they do things and they alter things in a different way in order to make it more enjoyable for the viewer. Like sometimes, even though Motley Crue lived a crazy lifestyle, it wasn't always. There was some boring stuff in there. You know, there's one inconsistency. You know, we'll mention mention later. I'm sure we'll get to it. And to me, if they would have done it the way it was originally happened, it would just flat out been boring. It would have stuck out like a sore thumb. But I noticed that. But I think the reason why they did it was because Nikki Sixx was such a huge Kiss fan, as it was kind of paying homage. Because those set decorators, that stuff does not happen by chance. That shot of that front of that album did not happen by chance. The live poster being placed predominantly in the center of the shot on the back of the wall, that didn't happen by chance. That's all placed.
And permission for every little thing. I mean, every little thing in that room had to have permission, and I can't even imagine that process is probably.
And so I think that was just kind of a tip of the hat to Motley Crue, or to Kiss from Motley Crue. It's like, hey, when I was a kid jamming on my guitar, jamming out the T-Rex, I had Kiss on my wall, and I was listening to a Kiss album that didn't come out till a year later, you know, so, or a couple of years later, you know, so, yeah, so inconsistency number one, you know, and we're not going to hit all of them. That's not what this is about. It's just the ones that we notice that are fun, and it's fun to just notice. So what did you think about the opening sequence? I got to know because it was one of those things. I saw a bunch of people that are like, don't watch this movie with your kids. And I'm like sitting here going, really? It's Motley fucking Crue. You know, did you think there wasn't going to be titties? And you know,
I loved it because I thought, I mean, it's opening the film perfectly to the craziness that is Motley Crue. I loved it. And how do you do that? How do you push that envelope as far as you can and still be on TV or on Netflix? So yeah, I mean, it was perfect. My friend Danny was here, and he said he has a daughter that's in high school, and he's like, I think she's watching this tonight. I don't know if she should be. So I mean, it was pretty cool. I thought it was a great opener.
I was kind of curious about how they were going to do the movie. I really liked how they narrated the movie and they moved the movie along, and they had the different members of the band. And even at one point in time, Doc McGee, who wasn't even managing Motley Crue at that time, you know,
inconsistency number 2.
Right, yeah. And there's at one point in time when they're out, when he's standing on the balcony looking out at the boys over with Ozzy at the pool, and Ozzy's done pissed and licked up his own piss and everything. And he looks and he's like, I've managed the Scorpions, Kiss, Skid Row. I'm like, how is he in the early 80s managed Skid Row that didn't come out around until about 89?
I kind of took that scene on the balcony as it was kind of a time jump. It was like current Doc McGee talking versus like Doc McGee back then. But when he was introducing himself to the band at the party, and he said, I managed Kiss and I made him a hell of a lot of money. He didn't manage Kiss until the reunion, right?
He didn't manage Kiss until the reunion.
Okay.
Right. He didn't manage Kiss until the reunion.
Yeah, there was a lot of talk amongst the group about
but I did like one of my favorite characters. I've said it many times already. My favorite character in the whole movie is fucking Mick Mars. Mick Mars is
perfect.
Mick Mars was great because he played Mick Mars's personality to a T. Because Mick Mars is an oddball. He was an older guy. He had been in and out of bands for a decade before, you know, he come to Motley Crue. One of the other inconsistencies I've heard is that Live Wire was not the song that was played for the audition. I think in the early incarnation of Motley Crue that it was Toast of the Town and the one that they played at the Whiskey A Go Go, the Take Me to the Top.
Take Me to the Top.
Because if you watch, did you like? We're going to jump all over the place, but did you love at the end? One of my favorite parts of the movie was at the end during the credits.
Oh yeah,
where they were showing the actual real footage and how they mimicked it in the movie, and they had Tommy on his motorcycle from that. What video was that? It was Motley Crue Uncensored, and he's telling the story of him running around in the hotel naked, and they're showing it beside him.
Yeah.
But yeah, the two songs they had in the very beginning was Toast to the Town and Take Me to the Top. So he probably would have auditioned to maybe one of those. But I just love the overall attitude that the guy brought, that Ivan brought to Mick Mars, and it made me miss the Game of Thrones that's coming back in like 3 weeks because I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan.
Yeah, and I loved every line Mick Mars had in this movie. Was great. Like, it was always just a short line, but it was like the best. Like,
and he always called Tommy drummer.
Loved it.
But yeah, I liked in the very beginning. He's like, "This now really didn't happen. Doc McGee never set foot in this shithole," you know. And a friend of mine, they really liked where they commented on the thing about, wow, I like how they're breaking the fourth wall, and I'm like, what's that? They're like, really? where the actors talk to the audience looking at the camera. I'm like, oh yeah. So they did that a lot. But I liked how they used the narrative to move it along. And it kind of surprised me when they got done with Nikki and it shows Tommy's house. And he's like, fuck yeah, I finally get my time to talk. Nikki's talking about himself so much. Man, that place is dysfunction central. You know, and he, you know, but, and he used the word dude a lot. But Tommy Lee to this day still uses the word dude, you know. So, yeah, I loved it. I really did. I liked how it all moved along and everything.
It felt like they really took their time from the beginning to Shout at the Devil. Like they really like it. It almost felt like they took a lot of time, and then it felt like from Theater of Pain to the end, it was like rushed. I don't know. That's what it felt like to me. But maybe that was just because I wanted more, and like every scene after that, I wanted them to dive into it more, which would have been boring for the average Netflix fan that doesn't know Motley Crue. But it would have been fun for us.
Yeah, I think what they did was it was almost like a roller coaster, and they spent a lot of time on that, you know, because they you know, they skipped a lot of things. You know, they kind of glazed over the fact that they had played at the Moscow Music Peace Festival.
Oh, yes, exactly.
I remember the very first time I saw Motley Crue live was when they played on the U.S. Festival, or the US Festival. They sang Shout at the Devil. And they did Looks to Kill. And I remember they must have been on some good coke or something, because it seems like they just flew through their set. And you could tell they were young and new and kind of nervous maybe to be playing in front of that many people, but they still did good. That footage, if you've never seen it, it's really cool to look up. You can see it on YouTube. But I agree, too, that they really took care. But here's the funny thing is they never really... The only time they ever really showed them in the studio was when they was recording Dr. Feelgood, and when they were waiting on Vince to actually come to the studio to record when he decided to quit the band. They didn't show them recording their first album at all, recording it themselves and producing it themselves.
That's another thing. I kind of wanted to see them releasing Too Fast on Leather Records, like by themselves, and then like all, you know, the record labels chasing them because they're selling it on their own. Yeah. Like that was a huge point. I thought that was missed, but
yeah, because it's like they were just playing in the clubs, and he walks in and goes, "Hey, I'm with Elektra. You want to sign?" And they're like, "Yeah," but they had actually already done quite a bit on their own. They'd released their album on vinyl. They'd released it on cassette. They'd actually released a few different pressings of it before it actually got picked up by Elektra and kind of re-recorded a little bit, remastered, remixed. They re-recorded some of Vince's vocals and some of the guitar, and they did some of that and stuff, like took some songs off. But yeah, and they didn't show. They showed the Looks That Kill video, them filming Looks That Kill.
That was spot on.
Yeah,
that looked amazing.
That was crazy. I mean, they had the moves and
they had the moves down pat, and I was like, wow, they really did a good job on that one.
Yeah, and I think they really spent a lot of time with that. I think they really hit on Shout at the Devil, and then you never really knew it was Theater of Pain until you saw Vince talking to Doc, and they were on the Theater of Pain stage, you know, and it's like, oh wait, okay, now we're in Theater of Pain era.
Well, you know? and there was that little bit of Tommy playing Home Sweet Home on the piano, but I think that should have been explored a little bit, because really, if you think about it, the 80s bands of that Sunset Strip era, you never really had the power ballad until Home Sweet Home.
Right.
That kind of broke the power ballad formula.
Yeah.
So I think that should have been explored just a little bit, but again, this is all fanboy stuff that, you know.
It's stuff that we would have wanted to see for sure. And I think they really, really, really glazed over Girls, Girls, Girls. I mean, Girls, that whole era of Girls, 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 I think was kind of epitomized during the whole, when Tommy was talking about, let me tell you about one of my average days. Because whenever he talked about, you know, 10:30 drum solo in a cage, and where he was flipping and everything, that was the Girls, Girls, Girls tour. I don't know if do you remember what drum, he didn't have a drum gimmick for Shout at the Devil. And they didn't even show his drum gimmick for Theater of Pain, but do you remember what it was? His drum gimmick?
That was when he went the length of the arena, right? And he played like other, like mute. I think like didn't he play like to AC/DC and stuff?
I think that wasn't that Dr. Feelgood.
Oh, that was Dr. Feelgood. Yeah.
His gimmick for Theater of Pain was very simple. He didn't have one for Shout the Devil, and his gimmick for Theater of Pain, his drum riser raised up a little bit, and then the platform, like my hand's the platform, the platform raised and went like this, and you were looking straight at him, looking down on top of him, and he did his entire drum solo that way, so you were looking at it from above. Mm-hmm. Because he's like, I want you to see me play, and so it came forward, raised up, and then raised up to a 90-degree angle like that.
Mm-hmm. Now, was that in any of the videos back then?
I think it was, because I remember the bottom of it was white. If you look, the bottom was white, and then Girls, Girls, Girls was the cage.
Yeah.
And then the one and Dr. Feelgood, he went out actually up over you.
Yeah.
And you could see him, and he went out up over the crowd.
He had those huge speakers in front.
Those huge speakers, and then the reunion, and then their farewell tour was the roller coaster thing,
which did not work in Kansas City. It broke, and so like he went out on it and like came up a little bit and then went back, and it was really really lame. Like I mean, they shouldn't even have done it, but
yeah. I do like. I think that they focused. I mean, I know that all four of the guys had their addictions and had their demons, and and they touched on them. I think that they portrayed all four of the guys very well, and I think they portrayed all four of them very fairly. But they did focus a little bit on Motley Crue, on Nikki's heroin addiction. And, because when I told my wife that, she's like, yeah, but he's the only one of them that died and came back to life. And she's like, did he really die? I'm like, yeah, he was clinically dead. He was dead for a little bit. I think it was, if I'm wrong, do you know how long? I thought it was somewhere around, I want to think 7 minutes or.
Yeah, it was, I can't remember.
He was dead long enough for you to think, oh God, this guy's dead. And I don't know if the whole, I haven't read the book. I will say this. I've not read the book. This makes me want to read the book. They did exactly what they wanted to do with this movie, because it makes you want to listen to Motley Crue, and it makes you want to read the book.
Well, I saw yesterday that they have 3 albums and 9 singles now in the top 20. So obviously whatever they did worked. And I didn't know you hadn't read the book. I haven't read the book since it came out. But the book is written exactly like the movie as far as the narration. Like I think Tommy is the second chapter, and it even starts like, "Dude, I finally get my chance," So it's pretty close. I mean, it's pretty faithful to the book.
I'm really looking forward to reading the book. I'm actually shopping online to try to find it this weekend, and I'm looking forward to reading it. But they did touch. I think they portrayed each character, each member of the band very well, and they showed that they all had their addictions. You really didn't know what they were, but you saw that they all struggled with everything. And I think they did a little bit of disservice in some places and eras, like you said. After Shout at the Devil, they flew through. My wife was like, even talking about with Dr. Feelgood. One of the things that I noticed, and it was one of those things that was kind of glaring to me, they had somebody in the band or in the movie, they had somebody portraying David Lee Roth, and they had somebody portraying, Ozzy Osbourne and, Heather Locklear. And then of everybody, of all the times that they show them in the studio, their most commercially and the album that they put the most time and the most money and the most production value into up to that point being Dr. Feelgood. And we all know that it was very well and produced by Bob Rock. And there's not even a presence of Bob Rock in the studio while Vince is in there singing, whatever song they're showing him recording or whatever he's singing.
To that point, I was shocked that there was no Tom Worman ever.
Yeah.
Because how hugely important he was in like Cheap Trick and getting those radio singles. He was the reason. I mean, Nikki Sixx writes great songs, but he's the reason Shout at the Devil's good. He's the reason Theater of Pain was good. He's the reason Girls, Girls, Girls was good. He had the knack of finding that single. Again, the average, viewer isn't going to care about that, but
no, like I said, my wife, I watched this I've only watched it one time with my wife. I watched it the other 2 times by myself, and whenever I was pointing out things like that at her, she just kind of shrugged her shoulders and went, so, and but it showed Nicky, like I said, it's his band and he was in charge, and so he was the one hitting the stop button and telling Vince to do it again. But we all know, if you've ever watched the documentary of Bob Rock producing Metallica's Black Album, we all know that when Bob Rock is in the studio, he is large and in charge, and nobody's telling nobody to stop singing or stop playing unless he's the one doing it. So,
and on Feel Good, that was such a huge album. You mentioned Moscow Music Peace Festival. I'm shocked they didn't touch on that, because that show that they played there, that was their first ever sober show. And to play a show stone sober after all those years in front of that many people is huge. And I mean, it wasn't even talked about. So, and another thing, inconsistency wise, I could be totally wrong, but didn't Motley fire Doc McGee after Moscow Music Peace Festival? It wasn't like it was in the book.
No, it wasn't
or in the movie.
It wasn't like it was in the movie.
The movie, I thought it was around Girls, Girls, Girls that he did it, because Nikki wakes up with a Girls, Girls, Girls shirt on. So, yeah, that was another one.
Yeah, and I also read I saw something in somebody's comments. I've been reading people's comments about inconsistency that Doc never met Nikki's mom.
Oh.
So Doc never even met Nikki's mom.
And couldn't you find an actor that looked a little more like Doc? I mean, it can't be hard to find a short, little bald guy.
They could have had Jason Alexander play Doc McGee.
That would have been great.
Costanza!
Do you know why Doug Thayer was omitted from the movie?
Did he not want to be in the movie? Do you know why?
Oh, I don't.
Maybe he didn't want. Maybe he didn't sign his. Maybe he didn't sign his release to be in the movie. My wife was asking me. My wife didn't know. She knew Tommy for being married to Heather Locklear, but to her, Tommy Lee was married to Pamela Anderson.
And that was a huge thing, because my thought on that was he got in so much trouble because of being married to her, with all the fights with the paparazzi and being arrested and going to jail. I thought, how do you leave that out? Because that showed that Motley was a decadent band, not even in the 80s. It followed them their entire career.
Oh, yeah. How do you leave out the sex tapes?
Oh, I know. That's huge.
I mean, Vince Neil, not so much as Tommy Lee's, but Tommy Lee's and Pamela Anderson's sex tape was huge. I mean, they could at least brought her into the picture and had them on the boat and, hey, babe, let me pull out the camera. They could have done it in 3 minutes,
And I totally forgot about Vince's. I forgot he had one too.
See what I'm saying? People don't even really think about Vince's. Let's see, the inconsistency. Speaking about Heather Locklear, he met her at the party, but everybody knows he met her at the dentist. So I mean, it's not as exciting as And regarding that party, that was another couple things I didn't like, because I believe in the book they said that they had all been up for 4 days. And to me, the way the party was portrayed, and I can't even imagine how difficult it would be to recreate that scene. That scene's tragic, and you have to be very ginger about recreating that. They did a great job, but to me, Vince didn't seem drunk when he left. And that
the fact that he was driving a Corvette kind of, because in real life it was a Pantera,
Yeah,
I believe.
Yeah, it was a
And,
Pantera.
yeah, and if you pause the newspaper clipping that comes up after the wreck scene, it even says, Neil was driving a red Pantera. And I was like, well, you just had him driving an orange Corvette. So that's kind of.
Yeah, could they not afford the rental on a Pantera?
Yeah, or destroying it. But
yeah. I think that was probably it too, is maybe, maybe the destroying it. Yeah, and talking about that wreck, the wreck, I knew it was coming whenever they, even though I saw the Corvette and I knew the timeline in my head and I knew that they were jumping around, but they weren't too terribly off.
When it said Redondo Beach, I was like,
and when it said Redondo Beach and it was the year, and I was like, oh, here we go. And my wife was like, what? I'm like, it's when Razzle dies. And she's like, who's Razzle? I'm like, you don't remember the guy, you don't remember the guy that Vince killed? But whenever he wrecked and Razzle was still alive and talking to him and talking about the Christmas lights, and then whenever he comes to and it cuts back and he's all mangled and laying in his lap and everything, that's kind of shocking. But
yeah, that was intense. And there were a couple intense moments that I wished there were more of, and the background music got real intense. The Razzle scene was one of them, and then the scene when they kicked Tommy's fiance off the bus. That scene had that dramatic music, and I wanted more of those because, although they were a party band, there was a lot of darkness.
Oh yeah,
and that's half the story to me.
But those guys, they had them down, not only in their moves on stage, but in their overall mannerisms. Machine Gun Kelly, that played Tommy Lee, man, he had Tommy Lee down. I mean, he really and truly did. A lot of people, I've heard a lot of people that are talking about bad acting and stuff like that. I didn't see bad acting. I've seen movies with bad acting where I've been like, oh my God, this acting is horrible, where people sound like they're reading something. I think, and they said bad wigs, no, it's half the time Motley Crue was fucked up and their hair was fucked up too. I didn't see any of that. I think that's just nitpicking for nitpicking's sake.
Yeah.
And even with the timeline stuff, it's stuff that a general fan won't even notice. Like,
yeah.
And but the things that bothers me is just some of the, and it doesn't really bother me to the point that I don't enjoy it, because I fucking love this movie. But like, and I tell you, dude, and I'm a kind of a gruffer, kind of exterior kind of guy and everything. But when Vince Neil's daughter was in the hospital dying, and she was saying, "Daddy, don't let them cut me again." Dude, my bottom lip was trembling, and I mean that was a gut wrenching part in the movie.
There was a line from Behind the Music that I really wish they would have included in there. That scene was very, very emotional, but there's a line from Behind the Music where she said something to him about looking like a little boy. I think she had lost her hair, and he. In Behind the Music, he says, no, I told her she looked beautiful, and he gets so choked up in Behind the Music. I was like, oh man, if they do that scene, they didn't do that exact line, but yeah, I mean, that scene was brutal, very brutal. Hats off to the acting. That little girl was amazing.
That little girl was really good. She was.
Yeah.
But then they made it seem like Vince just basically spent all his time in that bar. That Vince didn't have a solo career and put out an album and had a pretty decent song off that album.
Oh, yeah, and they should have. What was that Ford Fairlane movie?
Yeah.
Didn't he? Yeah. Didn't he do a song on that? So yeah, they should have. They just at least should have touched on that record. It wasn't like he was just sitting at the bar doing nothing.
Right. They basically. Yeah, it's basically like he was sitting at the bar. He was either by his daughter's bedside until she passed. Then when she passed, he was sitting in the bar until they came back and got him, And but one thing that there was a little time inconsistency, and it's not something that really anybody would really know, because you had they did touch on the what's his name, John Corabi. They did touch on that. The guy didn't even get a speaking line.
But I love how he's smiling. Like Mick walks out, Mick walks on stage, has the grimmest look on his face, and then the John Corabi guy's like smiling, like, "This is awesome."
Yeah, this is awesome. I'm going to play to 200 people. But and I've never heard that album, and somebody's like, "Oh man, that's one of the heaviest Motley albums." I actually listened to the first song off of it today, and I'm going to have to go back and I'm going to have to go back and dive into that album a little bit, because that's really the only Motley album I don't really have any exposure to.
It's the album, I think, that could be released today that if people didn't know it was Motley Crue, people would be like, "Holy crap, who is this band?" Because
Right.
I mean, it has not aged at all. It's still a great album, and to me, I think it's Tommy's best drumming ever.
Yeah. But they actually in the movie, Nicky gives up the contract in order to get the rights to his music, pretty much right after the John Corabi that album. And actually, Elektra didn't drop them until after Generation Swine, after Vince had already came back into the band. They didn't really touch on the fact that Tommy left the band because he wasn't happy that Vince came back to the band. They did the whole where he was in his house DJing, and Heather came in and caught him, had the tabloid with him with the porn star and whatever. And when they did that, I actually paused at one point in time to look to see if it was Pamela Anderson, like if they were going to they're going to lead way into Pamela Anderson now, and they never did. But he was sitting there and it looked like he was DJing, but he he released an album and stuff like that, and Motley Crue had two other drummers that didn't even get released on. And I think, and I talked about this with other people, and I think what happened, if they would have done a lot of that towards the end, like I said, they played Motley music all the way through it, which I thought was great. And they established the band, and then they went through their valley, and then after they went through their valley, they were on their way coming out. And if they would have started introducing other people, Tommy leaving the band, these two people coming in, I think it would have watered it down a little bit for the general viewer. And it would have seemed a little more, and they did I heard people refer to it as the Lifetime, the Lifetime channel or whatever, the Lifetime channel or the Disney ending. I heard some people that are like who gave them the Disney ending or whatever, But yeah, so
I would have liked a little bit on Generation Swine, because I mean that was a big event too. If you followed Motley all those years, getting Vince back and that first video, Afraid, with Larry Flint in it from Hustler magazine. I mean, that was a huge thing. And, the music scene had changed, and Motley kind of did this record that was very different for a Motley record. Yeah, I would have enjoyed at least seeing them in those suit and ties with the pig faces or something. That was I loved that album though. I think me and there's a handful of other people that like that record, but I always enjoyed Generation Swine.
I mean, like I said, after you get past Dr. Feelgood, you wouldn't think Motley Crue put out another album. I mean, well, that they put one out with John. Well, the fans knows they put one out with John Corabi, but they really didn't touch on it in the movie. Just that they were touring to basically empty arenas.
That was another thing. Do you remember around the Corabi period when Nicky walked off that interview because the person brought up makeup, hair, and fire, and he got super pissed off and he threw off his mic? I wanted that. I wanted that scene in there too, because that showed how kind of in a conundrum they were with the alternative scene.
Yeah, and I saw in one of my live streams I did the other night, I talked about, I had pulled up an article where they talked about things that got left out or got wrong, and they basically didn't really make out in the movie about how bad of a relationship that Motley Crue actually had with MTV. They had an off again relationship with them, and sometimes MTV would embrace them, and sometimes MTV would turn their back on them. Mm-hmm. And so but that's how MTV was with metal in general, not just Motley Crue. They had their flavors of the week, and that's one thing that I didn't like about MTV is they seem to play sometimes like modern radio. They seem to play a lot of the crap that you really don't want to hear. You heard over and over and over and over, but they don't play any good stuff. Yeah, and you wouldn't have thought they put an album out after Dr. Feel Good. You wouldn't have thought about the Motley Crue album or Generation Swine or Saints of Los Angeles, or you wouldn't have known about any. Saints of Los Angeles.
New Tattoo, yeah.
New Tattoo. I mean, they at the very end of the movie, I noticed they were doing the Saints of Los Angeles look, kind of the Saints of Los Angeles retirement look, where Mick's got the big top hat on and everything, and but. They did so many of the mannerisms, like some of the little things that I caught. Like there's one point in time there at the very end when they're coming out of the hallway and the guy's going down, knocking on the door, telling each one of them to come out. And Tommy comes out and he's got his sticks, which he did carry his sticks a lot, and he's doing on the wall as he's going down. And I'm like, that's Tommy right there. I've seen more than one video footage of him doing that very same thing. But all in all, I really loved it. I'm going to watch it again,
It's one of those films that gets better each time you watch it. Mm-hmm. Like, every time I watch it, I love it more. Like, when it comes out on Blu-ray, I'll probably take the day off of work and, buy it and just really dive into it. I hope things like the US Festival are on there, like actual real footage. Motley Crue was so big for our generation, and it led me to being a Kiss fan. I remember discovering Motley Crue 4th grade. My friend got the Shout at the Devil tape, and then I ended up getting Theater of Pain for Christmas, and that changed my whole life. It really led me to being a Kiss fan because I liked the theatrics, I liked the makeup, I liked the big hair. And the songs were so freaking good that Nikki Sixx to this day, Wild Side are my favorite rock and roll lyrics ever. Yeah. Without Motley Crue, I think I may not be a Kiss fan today. And so I have to love them. It actually makes me wish they would tour again. I know they signed those contracts, but
yeah,
I would just like one more go around maybe.
It would be nice. They did sign the contracts, but it would be nice to have one more ride around.
And you saw Shout at the Devil tour, right?
Yes.
Oh wow. Yeah. Did that feel dangerous? Like,
I remember even when I saw Kiss, I didn't feel really scared until I remember when I saw Kiss in '79. I vividly remember Gene breathing fire, and I vividly remember Gene spitting up blood. I remember him doing, had the green lights on him, and I remember him spitting it out and then doing his hands like this and putting his head back and doing it all around it, flying all over the place. But I never felt, even though everybody said Kiss was demonic and Knights in Satan's Service or Kings in Satan's Service or whatever, I never felt that with them. They just felt larger than life and felt like and looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. Motley Crue felt dangerous. Yeah. They felt demonic. Even, with looks that kill it. I mean, with Shout at the Devil especially. They were throwing the pentagrams in your face. They had the skulls, the candelabras, whatever the hell you call them, the candle things. The pentagrams on the drums. Mick had the pentagram head. I had one of those pentagram headbands.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I had one. And I remember when I was in my band, that I remember taking my bass drum off and taking masking tape and striping a pentagram on it, and then taking red spray paint and painting it and pulling it off. And my mom coming in like, "What the hell are you doing?"
That's awesome.
But yeah, I remember doing my drums like that, and
I made fingerless gloves
Yeah.
fourth or fifth grade. I bought a pair, and they only had a pair of brown ones, but I bought a pair of brown ones, and I wrote "Crew" in black marker on the
I
like.
had some of those actual legit Crew gloves at one point in time. Ordered. I mean, like I said, dude, I've had so much shit.
See, I couldn't order those because my mom was so
Yeah.
religious, and I had to keep Motley Crue on the down low. My Shout at the Devil cassette, I took a pocket knife and scratched off "At the Devil." So mine was just called Motley Crue Shout.
I remember the very first time that whenever I got the Motley Crue album, got it from J. Joe's, and I remember taking it home and opening it up, and it was a gatefold, even though it was only a single album, and it had those awesome pictures, those iconic fucking pictures in the middle.
That's Barry Levine, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think it is. Yeah.
And even the album, like the album is a matte finish. You see it right back there. The album's a matte finish, except the pentagram is glossy. And when you rub your fingers over it, it catches your fingers because it's glossy. And the inside's super glossy, and it's got that picture on the back. And you put it on, and it's like you hear that, and you hear the background masking stuff going on, and then that comes in the beginning, good, always overpowered, the evil of all men's sins, and it's sitting here, and I was like, oh, and then the music in the background swell, and it's like, be strong and shout at the devil. And I remember that very opening line, that da-na-na, doom, and I remember going, I remember my friend, me and Chris was listening to it, and then when it kicks in, that shout at the devil, I remember looking at my friend Chris going, holy shit. I mean, it was just like you had not heard something like that before. I mean,
and that's another.
Gives me freaking cold chills thinking about it because I can remember it.
That's another great point, though. Why didn't they include the backwards message stuff? Because the back of "Shout at the Devil" says, "Caution: this record may contain backwards messages." And has that ever been proven? Is there any on there? I've never heard it.
I think there's backward masking in the very beginning of that opening interlude coming into, there's backward masking in there. If you listen to it with a pair of headphones or whatever, there's some backwards masking in there somewhere.
Yeah. That would have been, I wish they would have touched on that. At least like why they went, the satanic route or, I mean, there was that little clip of the parents being outraged, but I wish they would have kind of done maybe a little behind the scenes look at like Nikki being like, hey, this is a great idea. It's going to offend people. Let's do this.
Yeah. And I remember that whenever Motley'd be like, we're not saying shout with the devil. We're saying shout at him, Cause I remember reading that as a kid. And I think Nikki said something like, cause like, shout at your bosses or your teachers, and I was like, holy crap, these guys are crazy. Yeah. I remember a quote from them saying, we don't care what people say about us as long as they spell our name right and print a picture. And because they were genius, man, because controversy in that album is what sold them. I mean, nobody even really knew about Too Fast for Love until this album.
Yeah, and I remember the first time I was introduced to Too Fast for Love, I was in middle school at that point, and my friend gave me a cassette tape of that, and I was like, holy crap, I mean, they sounded so young, Vince sounded different, and that was almost like opening a brand new world to you, too.
Yeah, and one thing that I do like about Motley was they changed every album. You go from Shout at the Devil to Theater of Pain. I like, and of course, like I said, Doc wasn't the manager at the time, but I like how they're like Entertainment or Death. Vince Nicky changed the name of the band, changed the name of the album this morning. Of course he did, But it was originally supposed to be called Entertainment or Death. I remember Smoking in the Boys Room came out, the video came out. It was a world premiere on MTV. You waited to see it. And I remember when it came out, and it wasn't like anything on Shout at the Devil. And it took a little bit of getting used to. My favorite song on I love Home Sweet Home. Home Sweet Home to me is it's one of the best Motley Crue songs ever made. Mm-hmm. But my favorite song on, and I'm okay with Smoking in the Boys' Room, but my favorite song on Theater of Pain is Use It or Lose It. I love Use It or Lose It.
That's a great song.
That double bass, and Save Our Souls is good too.
Mm-hmm. Mine's always been Tonight.
Yeah. I love how it speeds up at the end.
Oh. That squeak of Mick's guitar pick is, oh, man, so there's such childhood memories in that.
Yeah, that it does. Motley Crue is one of those bands. It's almost like they're almost like, I mean, Kiss is managing to do it now, but not to the same success they would be doing it had they had the 4 original members. But Motley is one of those bands that's kind of like the Beatles, and I would like to think like Kiss. They're one of those bands that you have to have all the original members, because each member brings something to the band and something to the music. I mean, Motley Crue would not be Motley Crue without Mick Mars.
No.
You can't, they wouldn't be Motley Crue without Vince Neil's voice, without Tommy Lee's drumming. I mean, without Nicky Sixx, his songwriting and his bass playing, which got better over time. They wouldn't be anything without. They wouldn't be who they are or who they were without those 4 members. And
Tommy's one of those drummers that you hear him drum and you immediately know within a second it's Tommy Lee. Mm-hmm. He has that style, that fat hi-hat swagger that is just beautiful. And then Mick Mars, as a kid, I never really thought about it, but then you grow up and you listen to his guitar playing. Without Mick Mars, those songs would not be Motley Crue songs. He just has that sound that's beautiful.
And you could tell he was the older member of the band, because every opportunity he got to play the damn slide guitar, he did it. Mm-hmm. And every opportunity he got to put a thing on his finger and do slide, he did it, and he did it so well. That's
another miss from the movie was Primal Scream. That them releasing that song was huge.
I love Primal Scream. Mm-hmm. I just like the way Vince sings in that song. I like the way the drums sound in that song. I mean, the way the drums sound on Dr. Feelgood, Bob Rock, the way he recorded and engineered those drums. The very opening lick to Terror in Tinseltown, that I mean, it's just like, if you have your stereo turned up, it will punch you in the face. I mean, it's just so, and the guitars, like I said, Mick Mars, the sound that he has, you hear his guitar and the stuff that he did, they didn't even, why didn't you at least show a few minutes of him doing that whammy bar motorcycle starting up with Kickstart My Heart? I mean, who did that?
Yeah. And then why didn't you touch on, we know the story, but why didn't you touch on, Nicky getting brought back to life and that inspiring the lyrics to Kickstart My Heart? Yeah. I mean, that was another kind of miss I wanted to see.
So you mentioned earlier about that you would like to have seen it as a miniseries. Mm-hmm. I want to hear your thoughts on that. Like, if it would have been a miniseries, how many episodes? Like, say an hour-long episode. How many episodes? How would you have divided that down? Because I watched a lot of miniseries type episodes on Netflix. What would you have done?
So I was trying to think about that, and I was thinking that like I love The Haunting of Hill House, and that had me sucked in. I tried to just watch one episode a night, and I couldn't wait to get home the next day and watch the next episode. I think Motley fans would do that. I don't know if a miniseries would keep the attention of the average person I work with that doesn't know Motley Crue, but at least that first episode, I would have done exactly how they had it, from the beginning to them playing Livewire and that girl saying, "Holy shit." And I just would have ended it right then. And you couldn't wait to see the next episode. Mm-hmm. And then,
they could have done that. They had several of those moments, like when you could have ended an episode with Nicky coming back to life.
Yep.
He was dead, and then he pops up, and and then it cuts.
And you could have ended it right with the car crash.
You could end it with a car crash.
just went black, and like the next episode would have been them sitting there at that Christmas light, you know. Uh, I I think we would have liked it as a series more, because I think the things that we are saying they missed could have been put in. They would have had a longer, you know. I don't think it would have been a thing where they do a season 2, but I just think it would have been more fun as a series. And was it originally supposed to be a series? I always thought years ago, hearing about it, that it was going to be a series, but I don't know.
Yeah, this thing's been in development for years, you know. I think it would have, I don't know if it was originally supposed to be a series. I think it would have been good if at least 6 parts. For, you know, I mean, because the album's almost, the movie's almost 2 hours. It's like clocks in at like an hour and 49 minutes or so. So even 4 hours, I think, would have been pushing it for them to. I just felt like, and I've heard a comment on this too, that it felt like it moved really slow in some places, and like you said earlier, especially in the beginning, and then it flew in others. And they hit the peaks of a lot of things, and then they went deep on some things. But then they hit the peaks on a lot of other things. They had Omissions and stuff like that they did. And but I think six 1-hour episodes would have been good. And I think you could have really, like you said, if they would have just made it up to that point where whenever they actually come together as a band and are like, holy shit, you know, because they didn't touch on Vince Neil's pre-Motley Crue days at all, other than he went to high school with Tommy. If you think about that, they only touched on Mick with him sitting in the doctor's office, looking like he belonged in the 70s, because he still had the mustache and he still had the long brown hair, and he reinvented himself and shaved his mustache off and dyed his hair jet black and changed his name to Mick Mars. But they really didn't touch on Mick Mars' childhood or him being in other bands, you know, showing him like I said, I love all of Mick Mars' lines. Sucky band's gonna have a sucky name, you know. He's like, I'm in Rock Candy, sucky band, sucky name, you know. But you know, and I remember the whole story about they were going to name themselves Christmas, and they showed that at the end, the Vince Neil in the limo. Hi, we're Christmas, you know. But they didn't touch on they touched on Tommy a little bit, just basically to get him into the diner when he met. You know, they really, the only origin they did was Nikki. They went to Nikki all the way back to being freaking 7 years old or so or whatever, you know. But Tommy was like literally maybe the day before he met Nikki, because he was going to go out to the show that day. So the day of that he met him, or maybe the day before, because they had the show and then he went out the next day, or I think it was that night. They were out that night. Vince, they met him at a party. You don't know any really backstory on Vince. You just know your backstory on Nikki, and you knew that Mick had a debilitating disease. And
I didn't know. It's been so long since I read the book. I didn't know he had that, or he knew he had that all the way back then.
I didn't know that either. I thought
was something that just recently.
Me too. I thought that's something that he developed, but he didn't. That he knew it coming in. So they could have really slowed down and up to that point where they kicked the other guitarist out of the band, and you know, I love that line. There's only room for one guitarist in this band, and that's me.
And they didn't touch on London at all. I mean, they showed the London poster,
right, and showed that they were coming from a concert. They didn't touch on London, you know. So if they would have done 6 1-hour episodes, they would have been able to take the foot off the gas a little bit, because even in the beginning, when it felt like they were taking their time, they were still omitting a lot, you know. I mean, you read Gene's book and you read Paul's book. Gene goes all the way back to when he's a kid in Israel. Paul goes back all the way to when he's a kid, you know, with his mom and dad, and you know, getting made fun of by kids because he's got his, you know, Stanley the Monster, because he's got his ear deformity. So even they go back and touch on their childhood. Peter and Ace, I've not read their books, but I've heard that they do go back and touch on their childhood. Because that's what makes you who you are and your backstory. And it's always cool when you have a character, and then I always love when you're watching a show and a character is introduced to you, but they're introduced to you a la carte as they are. And then later on, maybe they do a backstory on them. And you're like, oh, okay, so that's what made them the way they are. You see that a lot in stuff I like to watch. You mentioned like Haunting the Hill House. I'm a real big fan of American Horror Story. I like horror movies in general. I like stuff that has a tendency to be not really slash and gore, but stuff that has a tendency to be suspenseful, thriller, maybe a little on the demonic side. Like I love movies like The Conjuring and The Nun and stuff like that. So. But I think 6 1-hour episodes also would have been really good if they'd have done that.
Oh yeah, what would you score this on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being the best.
Man, like I said, I love it. I mean, I love this thing, and even me finding fault with it is not enough for me to ding it for it, because I'm just happy there is a movie got made about them.
Yeah.
And like I said, I caught myself sitting there playing drums and playing air guitar, and especially there in the beginning when Mick comes in and plugs up and he starts that riff in live wire, and then he's like, and I think it's cool that they're like, we're gonna need to tune down a whole step, because anybody that's ever played Motley Crue, that they tune down a whole step, because Vince he gets up there, he gets kind of whiny, so I would score it. I can't call it perfect because it's not perfect, but I have a hard time finding any fault with it. I take it for what it is, so I scored a 9. I really love it.
Yeah, I gave it an 8 out of 10, and the only reason I gave it an 8 was just because it was missing stuff I wanted. So really, I mean, I would give it a higher score than that. But yeah, I loved it, and it gets better each time I watch it.
It really does.
Now, have you've seen Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yeah.
Of the two, which do you think's better?
Wow, I probably like which is better and which one I like more. I think that Bohemian Rhapsody is probably, man. Honestly, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I loved Bohemian Rhapsody, but I even found some parts, like I said, of course, they focused on Freddie Mercury. But even some parts in that movie, it got a little long in the tooth. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, some parts of the movie got a little long in the tooth. But now one thing that I really did love that they got right, whether it was historically accurate or not, I really liked them showing them in the studio. They showed them in the studio a lot, especially when they were doing their first album, when they were doing the news, and whenever they were doing the album that's got We Are the Champions and Bohemian Rhapsody. Oh, no, not that, but Bohemian Rhapsody. What is that? What's that album called? Night at the Opera. But one thing that I didn't like was they skipped over really the recording of News of the World. They just had them in the studio doing the boom, boom, clap, boom, boom. We're going to write a new song. We're going to write a different song. We're going to use this as the percussion or whatever. But it got long in some places, but I like how the way they did the origin of them meeting. I loved. And I really felt like in a way that the Motley Crue movie almost parallels the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, because it's the beginning, and then it's the turmoil in the middle, and then it's the breakup, and then it's the three guys that goes together and gets together and goes back and gets Freddie and gets him back in the band, and kind of it's the same pattern. They get together, they get famous, they have problems, they break up, and then the three of them go get Vince out of the bar. And hey,
I never thought of that.
The movies really parallel each other in a very scary way. They go through Freddie Mercury's demons. They go through Nikki Sixx's demons. They really, but me, just because I like Bohemian Rhapsody, they got it right in my opinion, showing so much recording. I wish they would have done that more with Motley out with the Motley movie. They did, and they barely showed them in the studio at all. which I think does Motley a huge disservice. They really didn't show them a whole lot playing live either. I mean, you know, they showed them mostly the outside. They showed them outside the studio and off of the stage. They basically showed them either partying or fucking up or whatever. They really focused on that. And I would have liked it if they would have focused on the, you know, like at the end when they were all going up on stage. And I'm like, cool. Now we're going to get to see them do one more song or whatever. I did like it. I did like at the end how they were actually, at the very end of the movie, they were actually showing the real band. Yeah. You know, hey, we're Motley fucking Crue, you know, and I really liked that at the very end of the movie they showed the real band. I did like that.
Now, have you seen Straight Outta Compton?
No, not seen Straight Outta Compton.
I'm not an NWA fan at all. I'm not really even a rap fan. But Straight Outta Compton, I thought flowed perfectly, and I really wish they would have kind of done the Motley movie in the same fashion, because Straight Outta Compton felt more like a movie, like a story, and this felt more like, you know, characters narrating their own parts. And Straight Outta Compton kind of felt like you were learning the story by watching it, not having someone tell you what you're watching. It's a great movie though. I think you'd like it. If you like Bohemian Rhapsody and you like this, I think you'd like it. Just because it does show a lot of studio stuff too, and it shows like the creation of songs, which is really cool.
A lot of people don't really realize. I mean, I've recorded many songs, and I've been not only recorded them and played on them, but also helped produce and engineer for other bands. We kind of helped each other out and stuff, and we'd get studio time and we'd help each other out. But I've done the engineering, setting up the mics, getting stuff in the right place, doing the recording, doing the producing, the mixing. And it's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together that you actually have to create the pieces first and then put the jigsaw puzzle together that has layers, you know, layers on top of layers. And it's funny how you can listen to a song and then you just go and start punching things out. And you only have to punch out one or two things for it to change the entire vibe of the song. And then you punch them back in. And it's really cool. There's a video, if you've never seen it, and if the viewers have never seen it. You ever seen the Brian May video where he's in the studio and he's dissecting Bohemian Rhapsody? Have you ever seen that?
Oh, no.
You need to check it out. Check it out. I'll put it in the link, the description for viewers. But he's in the studio and he actually has the master reel. And he's like, you know, he's like, it was baked on this date and we bake it so it don't fall apart. But he's like, but luckily this has been transferred to hard drive. And so they're sitting there and it's like a 25-minute long video. And he goes through the whole process. And he's punching stuff in, punching stuff out. He's going back to the basic track, which is Freddie and the piano. And then he just starts punching things in where you just hear, okay, here's the guitar, here's my guitar, here's the solo, here's the vocal tracks. And, we had to do these and then mix them down to a track. And, and it's really cool. If you like finding out and seeing the way a song is created, that's a good video to watch. It really is. And I really love the Bohemian Rhapsody. I wish this movie, I know it came out on Netflix, but I almost wish that this would have had a limited engagement nationwide, maybe 1 or 2 weekends where it hit the movie theaters first. Because I would have loved to seen this movie on the big screen and heard it. I mean, one of our bedrooms has a projector in it, so we can project on about a 10 by 10 wall. And I can move my Bose that's in here attached to my record player. I can move it in there and we can turn it up and it can sound pretty good. So I'm probably going to do that. Or summer's coming and we made this thing because we have a pool in our backyard. And the whole back of our house is basically, it only has maybe 1 or 2 windows. It's the back side of the house. There's a lot of things like closets, utility rooms, and so there's not a lot of windows. But we have a window on the second floor that we can hang this big 20 by 20. We got some painter's cloth, and we put a piece of wood at the top of it, and we hang it down. We put a piece of wood at the bottom of it, and we take the projector outside, and I put it on a stand. and take the Bose speakers out there, and we hang out in the pool and watch movies on the back of the house.
That'd be cool. That'd be fun.
So I'm definitely going to be watching. This movie is one I want to see on the back of the house. You know, titties this big. You know. You know. So that's gonna be really cool. So yeah, man, I loved it. I really did, and I was really looking forward to talking to you about it and everything. Just like sitting down and talking about it and talking about all the things we liked about it and everything. And
yeah, it really gave me Too Fast for Love. Like, it really made me want to dive back into that record. You know, those are the songs I think from the movie that stuck in my head after I left. Like, 4 hours after watching it, Take Me to the Top's running through my head, and I want to put Too Fast for Love on. So that was the one record that really, I think if I was a brand new fan, that would be the record I would go buy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they really did focus on the, Live Wire and Take Me to the Top. You heard those quite a bit at the very beginning of it. And, and then, like I said, all the other songs are just kind of glazed over, but
yep.
But I think it was very well done, and and I know to each their own. There's some people they're being super critical of it and everything, and you really could be. You could really slash it up if you wanted to, but you're basically watching a movie that is meant to be. It's not a documentary. So a documentary. This is what I was telling somebody at work today. I was like, it's a biopic. It's a movie that is based on the book or based on, and Motley Crue was involved in the creation of it. All four guys were producers in the credits. See, they were all producers. So they were all involved in it. So nothing really got put on that screen or in that script that really, I feel like those guys didn't clear and say, yeah, this is okay. Because at the end of the day, they didn't want it. I think in the end of the day, they weren't more concerned with accuracy than they were with entertainment. And so they got it for the most part right, that the casual fan that's going to watch it on Netflix and pop it on for entertainment, it's not going to bother them. And even me, being a more hardcore Motley fan, I'm just happy that they had a good movie, and I think it was done really well. I think you could tell they put a lot of money into it. You could tell some of that stuff in movies is not cheap to pull off. So it was done really well. But it's not a biography. It's not a documentary. Documentaries are supposed to be as historically accurate as you can portray them, but I think they did a great job.
Yeah, and it was perfect for the brand new fan. The person that doesn't know Motley Crue, I mean, it was beautiful, because like if I was a 15-year-old kid now, not knowing who Motley Crue was, you damn believe I would be downloading every Motley Crue album I possibly could, because that was an entertaining 2 hours. And man, I hope it birthed a lot of kids who want to be in a rock band now, because it did, the real story did for us back then. So I think the world needs it again.
Yeah. Like I said, it was Motley Crue that made me want to get in a band. Peter Criss made me start playing drums, but Motley Crue made me want to start a band, because they looked like they had so much fun. Kiss, it was still to a point with Kiss, it was still, you didn't see Kiss really interacting in a fun way outside of them being but these were guys, and they were young, and they were relatively young guys, and you saw them having fun, you saw them partying, you saw them living that lifestyle, and Motley Crue and other bands that quickly followed that was coming up with them, like Rat and Dokken. I think it's all. I kind of felt sorry, because at one point in time they showed the bill with Dokken, but Motley Crue and Rat played together a lot.
Yeah,
especially at the Starlight Club, they played together a lot, and I kind of feel bad that Rat at least didn't get up on there on the billboard at least one time, because Rat is another band that I really love. Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini and just Bobby and all those guys. I mean, I really like Rat's albums. Their first EP was good. They didn't achieve what Motley did, but they were still pretty big. And they still influenced a lot of bands after them too. I mean, I remember wearing the black jelly things and taking a magic marker and drawing stuff on my arm that I didn't know what it meant or whatever. I remember doing that, and that was Rat.
But I remember Nicky used to write like "Eat Me" on his arm, and because I went through a huge phase of collecting like any Motley Crue picture I could find, and that was always the picture I had in my collection that I had to hide because I didn't want my mom to see it. Yeah, I forgot all about that marker arm business.
They'd mark their arms up. Yeah, and it was bands like this. It was bands like Dokken and bands like Motley Crue and Rat and all these bands that made me kind of step away from Kiss a little bit in those mid to late 80s because I was too busy listening to them and bands like Guns N' Roses in 87 and stuff. I was just too busy listening to other bands. Mm-hmm. And it took me a while to come back around to them when Kiss quit trying to be Bon Jovi and started trying to be more like themselves and started putting out like Hot in the Shade, which I wasn't ever really a fan of. I never really came back and embraced Kiss. I saw Kiss on the Hot in the Shade tour, and I actually didn't even own the album. And I went and saw them on tour. I think I told you this story. I actually heard the album for the first time on the way there on cassette to the show. Mm-hmm. Never even heard it. And I remember I liked some of the songs that was on there and everything. But, man, it wasn't until Revenge. When Revenge came out, I was like, I'm back on the bandwagon.
I would love to know the truth. We'll never know the truth. But I would love to know how scared Kiss was of Motley Crue in the 80s. Like, they had to have been like, oh, great, Motley's album's amazing. Oh, great, Theater of Pain's amazing. They had to have bothered them.
They were Kiss 2.0 in my way, except you knew who they were. You could see their faces. But they were Kiss 2.0 in so many ways. The theatrics, the makeup, the blood, the fire, setting their legs on fire and spitting blood, stuff that they did in the very beginning. And
that's why I got so upset with Nicky just a couple of weeks ago when he was complaining about the stage stuff. I was like, come on, you guys ripped Kiss off from the beginning, so it's all fair.
Yeah, everything Nicky said the last month or so, or Tommy said, or any of them said, I've kind of took it with a grain of salt because I know what they're doing. They're trying to stay on the internet articles and stay in the newspaper, or not in the newspaper, but stay in the internet articles basically, and stay on the social media to promote the movie. Now the movie's out. So I've even noticed that since the movies came out, it's basically been thank you, the Dirt's this and Dirt's that, and we got singles and stuff like that. But their presence on it has kind of, even just a couple days after, has kind of tapered down a little bit. Yeah. Because it was just such a big build-up and a push. Mm-hmm. So one last thing I want to ask you about. We talked about this in the live stream, and you wasn't there, and I really wanted your input on it. And we'll tack this on here at the end. First, do you have anything else you want to say about The Dirt?
No, just that I loved it, and it was everything I had hoped it was.
I loved it too. It was worth the wait, in my opinion. And like I said, I'm definitely going to be watching it more as time goes on. So switching gears a little bit, now that Motley Crue's made a biopic, what do you think about if Kiss tries to do a biopic and follows the same thing? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it should be done, but I think it needs to be completely honest, and it needs to show the bruises of the band. It needs to be honest in the fact that how broke they were in the beginning. It needs to be honest kind of about how Gene and Paul set the we run the band thing. Even though all four original members were a band, it was still run by Gene and Paul. I mean, and it needs to be honest about their egos. Needs to be honest about drug use, and I think it needs to maybe kind of end with Peter Lee. Well, I don't know. That's where it gets hard about how far it goes. But I think it needs to be honest. It needs to. It can't be. It can't be a glossy version of Kiss. It can't be what Gene and Paul, or what Paul wants us to hear. It needs to be what really happened. Then I think it would be a great movie.
Yeah. I totally agree. I can't say it better. And the only thing I would add, you were talking about where would it be the right place to end. Man, Kiss has had a longer career than Motley. So Kiss is one of those things that I think they would almost require for it to be some kind of miniseries. But once again, like you said, for the casual viewer, I don't know if you can, keep them obtained that many times. Your first couple episodes might have a lot of views, and you might not have as many views later on. But honestly, I think it would be, if I could have it my way, it would start. I wouldn't even start with their childhood. I wouldn't start with, Ace being in the Ace and Peter being in the gangs, Peter being basically the Mick Mars of Kiss, having been in several bands before. I would start maybe with Gene and Paul meeting at Stephen Cornell's house.
Yep.
That'd be a perfect. It is a pinpoint in time. It's when those two guys came together, meeting at Stephen Cornell's house. I would kind of maybe whisk my way through the Wicked Lester time, just to the fact that, hey, we're recording this album, we don't like it. We record this album, we don't like it, we're quitting. And then them finding Peter, just like, and then them finding Ace. It's parallel in the Motley movie. And then them, like you said, them starving, them practicing in that loft, that rat-infested fire trap of a loft with the eggshells on the walls, and them freezing their asses off in that loft that I don't even think it exists anymore. And then them meeting the people that they met, getting them started. And then you kind of work your way towards Alive, then Alive 2. And then you got the confrontation, you got the drug abuse. There's so many iconic scenes, like the time that Gene saved Ace from drowning in the bathtub. What the stuff that Motley Crue lived, Kiss lived it in the late 70s.
Yeah, Ace super gluing his hotel room to the ceiling.
Yeah, super glue all of his furniture to the ceiling. And then go through, like you said, the bruises and the blemishes. The Peter Criss was in an accident. He was in the back seat, but he was in an accident. Ace Frehley later on in 83, 82, 83 was in an accident. But you go through those blemishes, go through those bruises, go through the turmoil that broke the band up. And then I think if you're going to make an album about Kiss, you cannot leave out Eric Carr. No. So if you're going to make it to the Eric Carr era, you're right there to the point where you could put in Vinnie Vincent. Vinnie Vincent was integral and he was a major component to Kiss during the Creatures and the Lick It Up time. He was the guy that gave them ideas of songs to write when they were out of ideas. Kiss did not know how to make the transition, and I think Vinnie Vincent helped them make that transition. And they, after they kicked him out, they lived off that for a little while. The producing input that they got from Michael James Jackson and the inspiration that they got from Vinnie Vincent, they lived off of for a while. So you go through that. You go through the Vinnie Vincent. Mark St. John would be about as covered as John Corabi.
John Corabi.
He was there, recorded an album, had 2 shows, he was gone. Then you have the Eric Carr, Bruce Kulick years. Then you have the reunion. You have the Unplugged. Then you have the reunion tour, and you stop it there. You stop at the reunion tour. They're back together. You cut off everything, and a lot of modern fans be like, "Well, what about modern Kiss? What about the Kiss that we know?"
You could just do a blurb that said Kiss continued to play for
20 years and or whatever. But I think if you cut it, if you're going to do it, and like I said, there's some periods there in Kiss that you need to dig down in, and then there's some periods that you can you can hit the tops of, and you can stone throw like a stone across a pond across it.
Just end at that Detroit Tiger Stadium
show.
Yep.
The Tiger Stadium show. I actually mentioned that the other night. End it at the Tiger Stadium show.
Mm-hmm. And really dig in. Show Paul hating Gene in the 80s. The fact that Gene wasn't there.
He talks about it in his book, how much all the content he had towards Gene.
I think it's one of those stories that needs to show the bad side, and unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get it. I think we'll get if it happens, which I'm sure they've got to be shopping it. I'm sure everyone in the world's going to want a music movie now, with Rocket Man coming out this summer, the Elton John movie, and this being the talk of everyone. So a Kiss one will have to happen. I think a Metallica one would be amazing. But
a Metallica one would be good, but a Metallica's made a little bit one too many of those VH1 behind the music things. I mean, they had the one where they made the Black Album. Then they had the one where they were like having therapy and they were sitting on the couch talking about how much they hated each other.
I forgot about that.
And I'm like, you guys are fucking millionaires and you're talking about you hate your damn job. I mean, that's that kind of, I love, I remember when Master of Puppets came out. I remember a friend of mine at high school that I was trying to join a band with. We went over to his house, and he played Master of Puppets for me for the very first time. And from that very beginning, where it starts off with that classical guitar, and then it starts off with battery, and I'm like, holy shit, this is good. And I love the Master of Puppets album. One of my favorite albums of all time. And all the way up to the Black Album, but the Bob Rock, but then everything after that, in my opinion, I don't like the albums. There's a couple songs here and there, but I've not really followed Metallica much after the Black Album because I think they just tried to start, they pulled a Def Leppard. They tried to start just keep making that cake over and over and over, and they changed some ingredients here and there, but they kept making that cake. And then they got a little bit too experimental in sometimes. But yeah, I remember seeing that video, and they're talking about, the whole, well, we're having to go to therapy to be able to even play together, and I'm just like, just break up.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that.
Pull a Cars and break up. The Cars broke up at one of the big, and the Police, they broke up at some of the biggest, when they were the biggest in their career, because they made their money and they hated each other. They didn't want to, they didn't want to be around each other, so they broke up. So it's just, I think, I don't know if I agree with you. I don't know if we'd get the honesty that we deserve to get. I don't know if Peter and Ace would get a fair shake. They definitely wouldn't be equal producers or partners in the movie. It would definitely be produced by Simmons Stanley. But I still would like to see it. And I still would like to see it. I think we deserve it. I think they deserve it. They're in the frickin' Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They deserve a movie, and you're right. I mean, we got Bohemian Rhapsody, we got the Motley movie now, we got Rocket Man coming, and there's going to be more,
It'll be the new trend for a while.
It'll be the new trend for a while, and Kiss will jump in on it on its coattails. Like I said, I don't see it.
They'll do it way too late, and Gene will say something like, who would have thought a movie would be made about a rock band?
Yeah. I don't see them doing it and getting involved in it in the next 2 to 3 years with them touring the way they are. I don't see it happening. So we're probably, and even production on movies like these can take 2 to 3 years, even longer. Pre-production, shooting, and post-production can take even longer. But I still would like to see it in my lifetime. I would like to see it. Being a lifelong fan, I would. And I was talking about who would play, and I'm one of those worst. I'm the worst people when people go. I'm one of the worst persons when someone goes, who do you think would be good playing so and so? And I'm like, I don't know enough people to even know that. But if you look at Evan Stanley and if you look at Nick Simmons, they're almost spitting images of their fathers. I think that Evan Stanley and Nick Simmons could play Paul and Gene.
Well, and Nick could definitely pull off like the Dress to Kill era Gene. I mean, because they just have that. He has that super tall, kind of skinny look to him, and you just put a good wig on him. I mean, his hair is long, I think, anyway. So, yeah.
So, well, I just wanted to see what you thought about that, and but man, I appreciate you taking time out of your Monday night to hang with me.
No problem.
And
no problem at all.
Hope everybody, all of our viewers, enjoyed it. Like I said, if you haven't seen this guy's stuff, check it out. I put the link to his channel down in the bottom in the description there. Check him out. It's Rick from It's All For You Demon. And I really like the last things you put out. And just kind of as a side note here to you, I'm a little sad because I did clean out my closet yesterday in between the two video feeds. And I did not find my jacket.
Oh, that's horrible.
My wife is telling me it is in this house somewhere. She's like, we've not thrown it away. We've seen it since we moved here.
Okay, well, that's good.
She thinks that our upstairs, you know how upstairs are, how you have the, if it's A-frame type house, you know, the walls come in a little bit. And so we've got like 4 storage places, cubbies upstairs in the walls.
Okay,
and I've looked in one, and she is telling me it's in one that I've not yet looked in. But she wanted me to really dig into my closet before we went up there and start digging around. And
you should do a video on it. I mean, you should just like get like a little flashlight on the hard hat.
Yeah, it would be good.
Be like Geraldo.
It'd be good if I found it, because I was just getting ready to say if I don't find it, it'd be like Geraldo. Yeah, it's got to be in this box. It's got to be in this box. Yeah, the box that my belt buckle was in, and my thing from junior high, my Ashley Cougar's megaphone. This is from junior high, and this belt buckle was both in the same box. So I was just about sure it was going to be in that box. And my wife's like, you didn't sell it, did you? And I'm like, no, I wouldn't have sold that. And she's like, well, I hope it didn't walk off. And I'm like, well, I don't even know if somebody would have really known it was of value to walk off, and it would have been stored in a box somewhere. So I'm going to keep going through boxes. And it's funny, we've lived here 5 years, and we've got stuff that's still in boxes. They, just in different parts of the house and stuff. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I just wanted to let you know that I haven't been able to find it.
Well, you will.
Not yet. I'm going to keep looking. But anyway, like I said, I appreciate you guys watching. Check out Rick's channel. And Rick, I appreciate you taking the time to be with me tonight.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to wrap this up. I'm Brant, Within My Head channel, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.